All right, we've seen some interesting things happen the last few months with pipeline expansion projects being pitched, some expansion projects being completed that I think warrant some discussion and a deep dive into the pipes that take crude out of the Guernsey, Wyoming area. So some interesting things have happened there. I've done videos on Pony Express and stuff like that several months ago that do deep dives on Pony. So we're going to stay away from Pony and we're going to focus on some other pipelines, which I think could impact things there. Before I get started, some housekeeping items. I will be in Houston for a couple months at least, starting in September. So September, October for sure. I'll be in the Houston area on a short-term basis. I may extend for another month. We'll see. But if you'd like to talk to me in person, certainly I can stop by the office. I know there's a lot of interested midstream and oil and gas parties in the Houston area. I'd be happy to come by and chat and show you what we're working on at Plainview. I'll leave my email in the body of this the summary of the video at the bottom, like I always do. Feel free to reach out. Also, we're still taking beta testers for the tool. Things are coming along well. Thank you for the feedback that people are giving on that. It's very helpful. With that said, let's get started. Switch to the map view here. And if you remember a few months ago, I did a video on the Cheyenne Pipeline and the acquisition of the 50% interest that Plains didn't own from HF Sinclair. So I'll just bring that one up just as a reminder. And the theme of these next couple videos that I'm going to do is going to be the potential for increased competition for barrels out of the Guernsey area. So I touched on one of these potentials in the video a few months ago where Plains did buy up the 50% interest in Cheyenne that they didn't own. So they now fully own all of this pipeline. And they did hint on their call. I won't rehash the whole thing I did on that video. You can go back and look at it. It's from May, I believe. But if you go back and look at that, and what Plains said in their first quarter call, they did mention and hinted at the ability to push more volumes through this pipeline. So theoretically, they're doing that. Either there's increased supply, which there probably isn't very much increased supply, so more competition is kind of what they're going to do there. Is kind of the vibe I got from their comments from that quarterly call. So certainly you could see some Cheyenne and Plains getting a little bit more aggressive, pulling barrels there. Those barrels are going to go into their Saddlehorn pipeline likely, which they have a lease on capacity out of Cheyenne, and then can feed into Cushing. So keep an eye out for that. Saddlehorn is pretty full though, so it's not clear that they can actually move that much more through this system. So what we're going to talk about today, and stick with me a little bit, I'm going to toggle back and forth between this and some other windows and some other maps that I've pulled up. We're going to talk about Suncor's pipeline. So just really quick, a quick overview. Suncor owns this. It's the Rocky Mountain Pipeline. Let's get those off of there. And this is moving crude oil from the Guernsey area, these green dots, down into Cheyenne, and then further along to their Commerce City refinery in Denver. So if we zoom in here a little bit, you have Guernsey here. It's moving barrels all the way down to the Commerce City refinery, which is about 100,000 barrels a day in the Denver area. They also pick up a fair amount of barrels here at Fort Lupton. These are DJ barrels that come across from another pipeline. It's an Energy Transfer pipeline that connects from Suncor, or from Platteville down to Fort Lupton. So that's the quick overview of Suncor's pipeline. We're going to go a little bit more in depth here, and something that I think has flown under the radar for a lot of industry participants and industry analysts is that Suncor over the last 15 years or so has replaced this line here. So let's take a look at their replacement project, and this is from their website. This is what they deem the Rocky Mountain Pipeline Replacement Project, and essentially this was pitched as a replacement project of a 10-inch line that was going from Cheyenne. So this is Cheyenne right here, going down into North Weld County, down to Platteville, down to Fort Lupton, and then over into the refinery. So this this was a full 10-inch pipeline all the way down. They're replacing it with a 16-inch pipeline. So you're getting an expansion no matter what. Now, what's a little bit murky and hard to tell what's happening here, the replacement to me means they're taking the other pipeline out of service. And it does appear for the pieces that they've completed, which is all of it now. I can't speak for this middle section, but for the pieces that they've completed in 2016, 2018, 2010, they have idled some of those pipelines. Now, some of the original 10-inch pipelines. Now, did they take them completely out of service and retire them? It just looks like they're not being used, so they're not filled anymore. So they could be being used as backups or something like that. But they aren't completely retired or abandoned. It appears to me they aren't permanently abandoned at this point. So I do have data from the federal government that was submitted this year that says this piece here is complete, and it was complete sometime in 2024 or early 2025. So this pipeline replacement is complete. Just to sum up again, this was a 10-inch pipeline going all the way down to the Commerce City refineries in Denver. This has now been replaced by a 16-inch pipeline. So you get quite a bit more capacity out of that 16-inch pipeline versus the 10-inch pipeline. So let's toggle over to a deep dive of this actual capacity of the whole pipe. Remember, this is just the southern section of the pipe that went through the replacement. So we still have the northern section, which is legacy pipeline. So I'm going to toggle to a deeper dive of the capacities on each segment of this pipeline. So this is the view of, let's call it post 2018 until 2024. This is what the pipeline looked like before this last section was brought into service. So the northern part of the pipeline, you have the Guernsey origin point up here, all the way down to Horse Creek, Wyoming. And there's actually 3 pipelines, and I know you don't see 3 on the map. 2 of them are side by side and are too close together for you to actually see them. But there's actually 3 pipelines that move barrels down from Guernsey to their Horse Creek, Wyoming station. And these capacities that I have listed here are estimated by me, except for the 10-inch lines, which I think that they've disclosed around 70 to 75,000 barrels a day of capacity on the 10-inch lines. The rest of these are going to be estimated by me. They're probably pretty close, but they're not going to be exact. So I estimate 200,000 barrels a day of capacity from Guernsey down to Horse Creek. And remember, this is pre this section being completed here. From Horse Creek down to Cheyenne, the 8-inch pipelines end and they converge into a 10-inch pipeline. So that lowers the capacity a little bit. My estimate's 173,000 barrels a day. At Cheyenne to northern Colorado or North Weld County, you get the 16-inch pipeline that was replaced a while ago, and then the 10-inch pipeline, which, as I mentioned, they did take the old pipelines offline in some sections when they did bring on the 16-inch pipeline. So only 200,000 barrels a day of capacity there, but they do have an inactive line, which I estimated about 73,000 barrels a day of capacity that's offline. Okay, so here's the bottleneck, and here's why this completion of this project is important. Previous to completing this section, they only had one 10-inch line running through northern Colorado to get barrels down to their refinery. So the bottleneck was here, and it was 73,000 barrels a day was all the capacity that they had. So a significant bottleneck here that kept them from bringing a lot of barrels down. And then we'll look at further down, they had completed some of the replacement projects in the southern part of the line past 2018. So from Platteville to Fort Lupton, you had 200,000 barrels a day of capacity. Again, when they brought on this little section here and completed this little section, they did idle this 10-inch pipeline. Again, it's idled. I don't see it as being permanently abandoned, though. So it could be used for something else in the future, or it could be used for redundancy. And then the very southern section of the pipeline, this is the original 10-inch pipeline. That is actually still active, even though they've built this new 16-inch pipeline here. So they did keep both of these active, it appears. So about 273,000 barrels a day of capacity from Fort Lupton here, where they're getting DJ barrels, to the refinery. Now, reminder, the refinery is only 100,000 barrels a day. So I'm going to toggle back to our tool, and we can look at the flows. So if we look at the flows up just south of Cheyenne at the border between Wyoming and Colorado, you can see I've expanded this capacity because based on the data that I look at in 2025, sometime between mid-25 24 and early 25, this capacity of this line came online and debottlenecked this system. So we went from what was the capacity of 73,000 barrels a day up to the capacity of, I estimate, 173,000 barrels a day. So let's scroll back, toggle back to this piece, and I'll show you what the pipeline looks like after the replacement project got done. So the northern section is going to still be the same here. You still have the 200,000 and 173,000 barrels a day of capacity. And now with this completed section done, you have 200,000 barrels a day of capacity between Cheyenne and Fort Lupton. And then the southern section's the same. So you've debottlenecked this to where this is now the bottleneck here. The 12 and the 10-inch pipeline is what I have as the bottleneck here. Really close to 200,000 barrels a day of capacity all the way down this line. And that doesn't account for the idled capacity that's the likely idled capacity that could potentially be brought on. I'm not really sure, but it isn't permanently abandoned at this point. So back to this, you can see that's the increase here. Now, what we haven't seen flows really increase that much on this system, at least not we have Q2 data on this system now. We haven't seen flows, at least at this point, increase very much. So it doesn't appear Suncor is using that capacity to push more barrels down from Guernsey as of yet. Just to get you an idea of the rest of the pipeline, this is the capacity, and I've kept this the same because technically the capacity is about the same from this area, 273,000 barrels a day, into the refineries. And this is a combination of barrels coming down from Guernsey and a combination of barrels coming across from the Platteville area here. So I'll just toggle that on again. So they're grabbing barrels here, moving them down. More than just tons of capacity, more than anything that they would need between really across the whole pipeline now. So again, it's a 100,000 barrel a day refinery. They really don't need this much capacity. Perhaps they want it for redundancy and resiliency, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So let's switch over to the reasons for why they might have done this project. So I've mentioned a couple. So it is possible that they just were replacing an old pipeline. So if you look back in the data, the 10-inch pipeline, large sections of the 10-inch pipeline, perhaps all of the 10-inch pipeline, was built in the 1940s. So you're talking about a pipeline that's 80 years old plus now. It is possible that it was just entering the end of its useful life, and they're just not going to use it anymore, or maybe they keep it idle just in case something happens to the 16-inch pipeline and they can use it for a redundant pipeline to feed the refinery. That's certainly possible. The other potential possibility is they're going to use that excess capacity to push more barrels or market more barrels down this line and then market them to egress pipelines out of the DJ area. That's something they certainly could do. I would note, again, I'm going to click on this point. This capacity is now online. I think it's been online for at least probably 6 months. We haven't seen them pushing barrels down from Guernsey. So I don't believe that that's happening. That certainly could happen. They would probably also have to build another line that moves barrels this way to get to the Platteville egress point or connect into pipelines that can get the barrels out. So pipelines like White Cliffs or Saddlehorn or something like that. So White Cliffs would be one pipeline that they could connect into. But this pipeline, again, moves barrels this way as of now. It's taking barrels from the DJ and moving them to the refinery. They may need to make this bidirectional or reverse or make a new pipe connection if they wanted to force more barrels down this way and then into the DJ egress pipes. Again, this would add to the potential competition for barrels at Guernsey. So we've already talked earlier in this video about the Cheyenne Pipeline potentially taking barrels from Guernsey, more barrels from Guernsey. This is a potential, although again, the data shows that they're not doing this right now. So possibility number one, it's just a redundant line that they're going to keep idle and use it when there's a problem with one of their other pipelines. Possibility number two, they're going to use it to move third-party barrels down the pipeline and make money moving those barrels. It doesn't appear that they're doing that yet. They may do it in the future. Possibility number three is, again, this is an old pipeline. Maybe it's not sellable, but they could sell the pipeline. So certainly there are some pipes. where they don't have probably the access that they want to the Guernsey area. So Pony Express absolutely does. Saddlehorn has access to the Guernsey area, as I showed earlier, via their Cheyenne connection and their lease. But like a pipe like Grand Mesa would be one where perhaps they would want to purchase this and hook it into their system. That's a system that doesn't have direct access to Guernsey. It's just indirect access via third parties. And then I'd like to pitch one more possibility, and certainly I'm getting out of my wheelhouse a little bit with switching over to NGLs, but there's been a lot of talk and a lot of murmurs and wondering. It's one of the biggest mysteries in midstream right now is what Kinder is actually going to do with their Highland conversion. So the conversion of Double H here. So this is an oil pipeline. They're converting this to NGLs, Y-grade NGL. And there's a lot of mystery of like, okay, they get the barrel to Guernsey. What are they actually going to do with it there? And I don't know exactly what they're going to do with it there. But I'm heard it's really hush hush, and it's a big mystery. This could be one possibility. I have no idea if they're actually going to do this, but one possibility would be that they purchase this older pipeline from Suncor and move those barrels down to like the Fort Lupton, Platteville area. So from there, they could get on some of the NGL pipelines that take the barrels this way. White Cliff's second line comes to mind. They have an NGL pipeline. There could be a crude oil pipeline that's converted out of here. That's certainly possible. And then once it gets to Oklahoma, there's a couple options. I know Southern, I don't know if they have capacity. I don't know if there's open capacity out of the DJ for NGLs, to be completely honest with you. Out of Oklahoma, I don't know if there's capacity, but you have Targus Grand Prix system. You have Phillips 66 Southern Hills system as well that could take those barrels down to the Gulf Coast from the kind of the Oklahoma Cushing area. So that's something to keep in mind. And certainly if you got something like a Double H, a buy of this system, and then they decided to convert a let's say White Cliffs converted, that tightens things up for the oil market pretty significantly out of the DJ and out of the Rockies. There would still be crude capacity out of that area, but it certainly would tighten things up a lot if there was a crude oil line converted to NGLs out of this area. Something to keep your eye on, and we'll see what Kinder decides to do. We should be hearing something soon. I think that project comes online early 2016. So it may be a slow ramp and then plans to do something bigger. I'm not exactly sure, but certainly this is something to keep an eye on. If they were to convert something over, it would have pretty significant implications for egress out of the Rockies. The next video, we'll talk about another pipeline out of Guernsey, and if you've watched some of my other videos, you may be able to guess what pipeline I've touched on it in some of the other on some of the other videos before, but we'll talk about how competition, they may throw their hat into the arena for competing for barrels out of the Guernsey area, and could put some pressure on the likes of Pony Express and Saddlehorn out of that area. So I hope everybody has a great week. I'll be back with that video probably at the latest at the end of this weekend. So stay tuned for that, and everybody have a great week.